Splunk Search can do a lot more than matching keywords. Let's try some simple filtering using some of Splunk's search syntax. So to get started, we'll click on Search and Reporting under Apps. And then here under Search, let's start just by putting an asterisk. It will show us all of our log data that we have. I'm going to change it from last 24 hours to all time, just because I don't have that much data to show yet in the last 24 hours. So the first thing we might do is narrow this down just to a specific host. In our case, we're only getting data from one host, but we can pretend that we have more than one. There are a couple ways to do this. You can actually just click on the keyword down here and say Add to Search. And at this point, we can remove the asterisk. The other option, instead of clicking on it, is that you can type it in. And if you say host equals, Splunk will try to autocomplete with what it knows from your data. So we'll choose web. The first bit of syntax we're going to show is the AND keyword. So that's capital AND. This keyword is actually implied if you just use a space. So if I added a search term, say HTTP, Splunk would automatically imply an AND here. But I think it's helpful to actually explicitly say the implied syntax, especially as your searches get more complex. It can become quite difficult to understand where there's an implied AND. So instead of HTTP, let's say this is source type equals, and we can choose here between Access Combined and Linux Secure, which are the two log types that we've imported. Let's start with Access Combined, and we'll run our search again. So that will narrow it down just to those web server access logs. Let's say we wanted to include entries from either log type. For that, we can use the OR keyword, and we'll say source type equals Linux Secure. And we'll search there. But at this point, our search is becoming a little bit ambiguous. Does this OR keyword mean that it will show access logs only from web, but will show secure logs from any host that it has? To avoid the ambiguity, you can use parentheses in your query. So we can wrap this OR statement in parentheses. In this case, the parentheses actually would be implied in the right place. But again, I think this really helps clear it up if you're dealing with a more complex query. And as you build a query and add more statements, it can really help keep things organized. If we did want to include the access logs only from our web host, but include secure logs from any host, we could move the parentheses to the beginning of the statement and then before the OR statement here. That would limit the scope of this host equals web statement just to within the parentheses, only to host and access combined source type. So let's remove those parentheses again and put them back where they're implied. And let's narrow this down to only show the 404 errors. So we'll say and 404, and we'll search there. Now in this case, the Linux Secure log won't include any 404s, so we could probably take that out. But here we can see our narrowed down search. Because we've used the parentheses, it's kept these blocks together. So there's 3 different query statements, each separated by an AND. It's just that the middle one happens to include 2 search terms. The nice thing here is if we also wanted to include, say, login failures, so we'll say invalid, which will match invalid logins. And we can do that in parentheses. Here we can show those 2 different kinds of errors across those 2 different logs. This sort of thing could be useful if you were trying to track down suspicious activity from a particular login or user. You could try to see if there was a correlation between errors on your web server and login attempts, maybe from the same IP address.